But email me a little bit later and I will send this to you. And basically it's a breakdown of how to change your back tire. Right, so I'm going to do some identification on bicycle components. I'm going to show you a couple things about how to make some minor maintenance adjustments. Just because the majority of what we want to teach you is how to make sure that you can leave your house with confidence and not have to call the minivan of shame if you get a flat tire. So this picture right here is if you do not have a saddlebag that's packed with everything that you need. Leanne has donated her time and money to create this little pack right here, which is exactly what's on this picture. So you get your saddlebag, and in that saddlebag you've got 2 tubes, 2 CO2s with an adapter, a multi-tool, a patch kit, and 2 tire levers. Now, if you guys have any other tire levers than these, and I'm not pitching these for sale, I'm not associated or affiliated with these guys, I've just broken and busted so many knuckles on cheap tire irons. If you get those cheap free ones, throw them away and buy one of these because they're thick and you're not going to hurt yourself with them. And you can see how big they are and how thick they are, right? So they're called the Pedros. They're different colors, so you don't have to get pink. Cleaning your bike. Here's the thing. A clean bike is a happy bike. 90% of the time when somebody brings their bike to me and says, my bike doesn't work, it's because it's filthy. And all this stuff gets all gummed up, right? So you want your chain to be, if you touch it like that and you get really dirty, or if you end up on the regular having that tattoo on the back of your calf from your chain, clean your chain, right? So there's a couple of different ways to do that. You don't want your chain to be dry and clumpy, but you don't want it to be completely black. That's not bad, right? Because that's just usage. Sometimes I grab them and I'm like, God damn, right? So, a couple of things that you can do. What I do when I clean my bike is, first thing I start with is the drivetrain. Get this clean, and then after that, once this is fairly clean, then when you're cleaning the rest of your bike, you're not smearing grease everywhere. So there's a couple different ways that you can clean your bike. One of them, don't take it out back with a pressure washer because that's going to get water inside of the bearings and that's going to make the bearings go bad quickly, right? So what you want to do is grab, this stuff right here. So you can get pretty much any degreaser and spray it on your chain. Be a little bit careful about some of the bearing surfaces, but spray it on the chain and you can kind of, get in and around this area. This stuff right here, the speed grease, has got a lot of pressure behind it. Right, so if you take this off, it's got some pressure, right? That is great for getting inside and getting a really good deep cleaning on the chain, but this stuff is 14 bucks, right? And with that much pressure, you're gonna empty this can real quick like. So unless you need this stuff, get yourself like a cheaper degreaser or just really lightly use this stuff and try and clean it. The more often you clean it, the less you have to use of the entire can trying to get all the gunk off of it. Does that make sense? Yeah.
How do you feel about Goo Gone?
Goo Gone's fantastic. Really good stuff. Does anybody know what Goo Gone is? It's like a turpentine or something like that. It's an adhesive remover, right? So if you ever have like a sticker or something on that.
If you run into a pole with paint on it on your car, you can use it to get the paint out the side of your car.
Yeah.
That's where I learned about it.
Yeah, it's good stuff. But most any degreaser will use just to kind of spray it on there, get most of it off. If you have, I've got these, this is a cheap shop cloth, but if you were to use like a terry cloth towel, just for the deep cleaning, that will, what you do is hold it right there and just go like that to get most of the gunk off of it. When you want to clean this, what you want to do is, okay, I'm going to digress a little bit. When you want to get the back wheel off, the first thing you do, and I'm just going to make this as easy and simple as possible, the first thing you want to do is go into the small chainring. Right? If you shift your bike into the small chainring, I would never tell you to cross chain your bike except for right now, right? Because I want to take as much pressure off of the derailleur as I can. So if I go to the small chainring in the front and the small chainring in the back, it gives me as much movement right here. It doesn't make that spring real tight. So if I unload that derailleur, then it just falls right out. It's as simple as that, right? So Cassidy has his brakes undone, but normally there's a little lever right there, right? So most of you are going to want to undo that lever before your wheel drops out. So anyway, take your little bit of degreaser and kind of spray it on that, and then take this, just kind of push it off like this, and then if it's really filthy, take the inside of this and just kind of run it through each one of the gears, right? And that'll make that really sparkly clean. Once that's clean, you know what gear it's in because you just put it in the smallest gear. It makes it really easy to put the bike back on, or put the wheel back on. Just line it up. And it's back on. It's as simple as that. Right now, I'm going to go through a little bit later. I'm going to go through how to change the entire the tire, take the wheel off, take the tire, put it back on, and I'll show you how to do it really, really quick. If you're doing a 20-minute tire change, you're doing something wrong. It should be really, really simple. That being said, there's a tire and wheel combination that could be suboptimal. Sometimes it's really easy to put it on there. Sometimes they're very, very challenging because of the not the most appropriate tire and wheel combination. They're just really difficult to put on there. I can't tell you exactly which ones that is, just because it's happened to be random. Like some wheels and tires just don't happen to mix together. This is a Zip and a Continental. I have this on one of my bikes, and it's a fairly straight setup to be able to get this stuff on there. Okay, so once the drivetrain is clean with any sort of a degreaser, Goo Gone, whatever you happen to have, then the next thing is to clean the entire bike. If you this is it's called Showroom. It's $7.99. This stuff works fantastic. However, you know, just because I want to make sure that everybody has the easiest and cheapest way to do stuff, if you go to like the dollar store and get that cheap dollar store pledge, it's not far off of exactly what this stuff is. And you get that lemony fresh fragrance. So yeah, this stuff works really, really good. I think there's a little bit of an abrasive in here, right? So sometimes it will actually get out some of those streaks and marks or whatever. The pledge isn't going to have that. So I actually use a lot of this stuff because I get a really good discount on it. So I like this. But like I said, pledge works fantastic. Going back to this, stem to stern, right? Just spray literally everything with this stuff. And in
wipe it off with a rag or rinse it? Or
yeah, right. With a terry cloth towel.
Okay.
Yeah, not necessarily a shot cloth, because sometimes if you've got like a matte finish on your bike like yours, it might tend to smear, right? So if you get a terry cloth towel or the lid-free kind of terry cloth towels, that'll actually clean it really, really good, right? And like I said, don't worry about spray literally everything. It's a nice coat.
Sorry.
I was hoping that wasn't my phone.
Sorry.
If you have disc brakes, Ann has disc brakes, right? Everything except the disc. Do your best not to get this stuff on the disc, because if you do, those discs are going to scream really, really loud. So, and if that happens, then get some rubbing alcohol, and that should take most of the oil off of the disc. But yeah, try not to get any lubricants on the disc at all. And what I was going with this is, once you spray literally everything down with this, as you're wiping everything off, if there's something that needs attention because you're wiping it down, you're going to notice it, right? That's why I say spray everything. It's like, oh, that's messed up, so we're going to fix that. Oftentimes what I'll do is, if it's really filthy, I'll clean the drivetrain, pull both the wheels off, spray everything down, put both the wheels back on, and then just wipe everything down that way. This, you got different sorts of chain lubes. This is a dry lube. So if you are, I think the gravel bag would be probably one of the only ones that I would super address. If you're riding in really wet conditions, it's better to use a wet lube, not a dry lube. The dry lube is going to make the chain look cleaner for longer, but you have to add it more often. The wet lube is, this is our camera person, Maya. She's just some stranger that admires me and likes to come in and take pictures. So the dry lube actually works best for most scenarios. Like I said, if you're going to be riding in really wet conditions or rain or whatever, the wet stuff is a little messier, but it works a little better in the long run. Questions on anything so far? Nope? Okay.
Actually, Tim, does this company make a wet lube as well?
Yes.
What's
this
wet?
is Finish Line.
Okay. I use dry lube finish line, so they made a wet lube.
Yep.
Okay. I just have never used it.
Yeah, they've got a whole lineup of this. They've got the ceramic wax, they've got this stuff, right, a bunch of different things. One other thing for cleaning this area right here, I'm going to jump out of the picture real quick and show you a lube for the derailleurs. And we don't have any. So there's a product called Triflow, and it's a Teflon coating.
Actually, that's what I use, is Triflow.
Yeah, Triflow it's like WD-40, but it's a Teflon, so it's really good. So what I'll do is I'll go to Home Depot and I'll get one of those big giant cans of WD-40 and just spray it. I'll just spray everything, right? And I'll actually use it as a cleaner. Get it as clean as I can. It works itself. It's WD-40, water disbursement, right? So it's actually gonna it's a cleaner and lube all at the same time, but it's not the best lube for long distance. So I'll use the Triflow, which is, like I said, a little bit of Teflon coating, and I'll just hit all of the pivot points, right? Both here and right there. So I cleaned it, I lubed it all at the same time. Does that make sense? Okay. So as far as component identification, I think, oh, one more thing, this guy right here. If you have disc brakes and you're the only one that has, you have to, well, yours is different because, are you hydraulic?
Yes.
Okay, so if you have hydraulic brakes and you pull your wheel off, this little guy you want to put inside of the caliper. Are you familiar with this? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you happen to have your wheel off and you squeeze that caliper, it pushes the pistons from the caliper out a little bit too far, and then when you try to put the wheel back in, it scrapes. Right, so if you're careful enough and you could pull the wheel off and make sure you do not touch the brakes, you're fine. Like if you're just gonna, like for me, I put my bikes on top of my car. So, and if I know nobody's gonna touch those brakes up there, I'm not gonna use this thing, right? But if you have a potential to squeeze the brakes with the wheel off, make sure you click one of those in there inside of the caliper, right? If you don't have one of these, I think you can get like a box of 12 of them on Amazon for $1 or something like that. Okay. So, questions on anything yet? Okay. Easy, small maintenance. So, this guy right here is a barrel adjuster. So, if you are having a problem, let's just say you're riding and you hit a massive bump and you bent your wheel and you had to get home, right? You can take and adjust. This is a barrel adjuster right here, right? And that's going to open and close the brake calipers. Right, so that's what that little barrel adjuster is for. Most of you have this. If you have disc brakes, you don't have to worry about it because the bent wheel doesn't affect your calipers. You see them? That barrel adjuster right there on the top of where the cable comes in. Yeah. So as the cable comes into the brake caliper, that's what that thing is right there. Okay, does that make sense, everybody? In the front?
That just loosens and tightens them?
Just loosens and tightens it, right? So this lever right here opens and closes the caliper to get the wheel off, right? And then this little guy right here micro adjusts it in and out, right? Like I said, to open and close the caliper a little bit. So if you're finding that you're riding and all of a sudden the brakes are really, really, like you're hitting here, right? You want to tighten your brakes up a little bit. So as you screw this out, basically what you're doing is you're lengthening the cable, right? So I'm making the housing a little bit longer, which is making the cable a little bit shorter. Does that make sense? And then it's not quite, so you want these to be the same, right? So if one's like really close and one's far away, then you can adjust that with this barrel adjuster. Does that make sense, everybody? Yes. Okay. Most of the time, you're not going to have an adjustment right here. So, can I mess with your bike? Do you care? Okay, I'll fix it when I'm done. A lot of times you don't have an adjustment for the front derailleur. Depending upon what kind of a bike it is, there's no barrel adjuster for that. I think Cassidy actually has one right here. But for the back, there's another barrel adjuster, right? So say for example, his bike, it's nice and quiet, right? But if I were to go, So he's riding along, and the bike starts making a lot of noise, which it's not doing, so it's awkward right now. Your bike is really quiet. So if you're ever riding your bike and it starts making this awkward noise, it's not like nice and quiet, it's really, really loud noise. First thing you want to do is check the lining between the front and the back, right? So oftentimes, though, if you're cross-chained, the chain's going to be rubbing on the front derailleur, right? So fix that first by adjusting your gears back here. And then if that doesn't work, then this barrel adjuster right here, if it's just click, 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 you can come in here and turn it count your turns, right? Go like 1 or 2, because it clicks, right? Go 1 or 2 clicks one way, and then keep turning it, and if it goes away, great. And if not, then turn it 1 or 2 clicks the other way, and turn it, and it might go away, right? Does that make sense? Right? Because that is a micro adjuster, just like it was with the brakes.
So you're talking cackling as though it wants to shift gears. That's what you're talking about,
right?
Okay.
Right. If you're in, so you know if you're like in a gear, right, and it's nice and quiet, everything works right. But if you know, it's no matter what gear you're in, it's like clack, 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 or you have to shift gears to get rid of that, then there's probably a derailleur adjustment. If it's way out of whack, just bring it in. A derailleur adjustment in a bike shop only takes a couple of seconds, and it's easy to fix, right, if you know what you're doing. If not, like I said, let's kind of play with that a little bit. If you just get it so far out of whack, you're like, oh my God, bring it into Rancho and he'll just fix it real quick. Or if I'm here, I'll fix it real quick. It's pretty simple.
Tim, I have a question.
Yeah.
So my bike sometimes it shifts on its own, like it falls out of gear, or it.
In the back or the front?
In the back.
I don't know. I guess I don't know. But is that a derailleur thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So everything that I just said, right? If you can't seem to get this lined up, when you're setting your bike down, notice that everybody's bike is laying with the drivetrain up. Right? That's on purpose, because if you set this down, the derailleur hanger is a separate piece that bolts onto the frame. Right? This bolts onto the frame, the derailleur hanger bolts onto that. It's made out of soft aluminum on purpose. So if you crash your bike or drop your bike and it bends that thing right there, then the derailleur's out of adjustment. Right? So no matter what you do over here, it's not lined up. And there's no way you're going to be able to get it to line up because it's bent. So they actually make a derailleur hanger fixer, right? Where you can line everything up and check the alignment, and if it's bent, you can bend it back. If it's bent too far, it's gonna break. But that's on purpose, because in the olden days, we didn't have a derailleur hanger. When that thing broke, your frame was toast, right? So this is the sacrifice. If this thing breaks, fantastic, you just saved your frame, and you can buy another one of these for between 12 and like 30 bucks or something like that for a new derailleur hanger. They'll put that on there and you just save your bike. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So always try to set your bike drivetrain side up, right? Questions on anything? Okay, so component identification. When I'm talking about whether you want, for your handlebars, these things are called hoods, right? So this is a road bike. These are called drop bars. Did we have a time trial bike? We did. Nope, we don't. We don't have a time trial bike. You have a road bike with aero bars on there. Okay. No, you do have a time trial bike. Good. Okay, can you bring that up here? Good. So these are called drop bars. These are called hoods, right? In this particular setup, it's a time trial. So this would be the base bar. These would be the aero extensions, the pads. Brakes are a little bit different. You have electronic shifting. So electronic shifting is pretty cool because it's going to dial in the shifting, and it'll be perfect shifting every single time, right? One advantage of electronic shifting is it will shift by itself when it wants to. I mean, just by hitting the buttons every time. The other advantage to having electronic shifting on a time trial bike is because she can shift from the extensions and from the base bar. Super cool. Old school, it was like, had to shift here and then nothing down here, so you had to reach up to shift. So really cool setup right there for a time trial bike. When you see the time trial bikes, a lot of the time the rear brake is down here as opposed, different from up there, so the adjustment down there is going to be a little more challenging. And the other difference is you saw how the way I pulled that rear wheel off, right? We already talked about yours. So one of the challenges with some of the earlier time trial bikes is they have horizontal dropouts right here. We don't have that in this particular setup, so I'm not gonna take your time to go up and show you how to get that off because none of you have a bike to worry about it. So thank you. I think we got the brake calipers, water bottle cages, front derailleur, rear derailleur, chain cassette. When I refer to a cassette, I'm referring to these things, right? You've got big chain ring and small chain ring in the front, and a cassette back here. Depending upon how old your bike is, you have anywhere between, if we go really old school, and anybody here actually had a 10-speed bike, there were 5 back here and 2 in the front. And then we went through and started getting like, you know, more and more back here, and then for a while we had 3 in the front. We stopped doing that, thank God. And now we're all the way up to brand new bikes are going to be a 12x1, right? What's yours?
What's mine?
No.
Oh, Patrick's?
12x1.
12x1, right? So he's got 12 gears back here and 1 gear in the front. That's an option that you can choose. You know, you don't have to do that. Some of the newer bikes come with the option for 1 or 2 in the front and up to 12 in the back. That means just a thinner chain. So, questions on anything? You guys are a chatty crowd. Okay, so what I'm going to do is run through this real quick and again, because I apologize, I didn't print up a bunch of these things. I actually have this printed out with very, very specific instructions from beginning to end, exactly how to change a tire. So if you guys, you know how to get a hold of me, my flyers are right there. Email me and I will send you this, and it'll have the very specific step-by-step instructions on how to change the tire from very beginning to very end, okay? But what I'm going to do is show you real quick. The first thing I'm going to do is, what? When I get a flat tire, what's the first thing I'm going to do?
Small ring.
Yes, small chain ring.
Oh.
Good. So, small chain ring. On a normal bike, I would loosen the little lever right here for the brake caliper. This is, Cassidy's got a really wide wheel on here. So the older bikes had a wider tire than the rim itself. Cassidy's is even, so it doesn't matter for him. So he doesn't have to loosen that. So take that off, small gear, pull that, it just falls right out, okay? When that happens, oftentimes this, right, is already gone. So you loosen that guy right there and it all comes out. Now, this little guy right here, I don't use this. Do you use this because it rattles?
Yeah.
Okay. So on most bikes, take this thing off and throw it as far as you can, right? It's an exercise. You absolutely don't need this on most bikes. The reason Cassidy has it is because oftentimes, depending upon the kind of the wheel you have, this will end up rattling a little bit and it will drive you nuts. Most bikes, it doesn't do that. So don't even worry about this thing. It comes on all the tubes. When you open up the tube, that thing is on the top, right? Right. The reason I'm saying don't do that is because if you're in a race and you get a flat, you have to take that thing off. But when you're putting it back on, you're holding it. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. So once all the air is out, what I'll do is start on the opposite side of that, right? So the valve stem is down here. I'm going to start on the opposite side. Take the little scoopy thing, reach inside, and I'm going to grab the bead, right? Once I've got the bead, pull it out, take this all the way out, tire stays on, that comes out. Next thing I'm going to do is check for anything. Why did I get a flat? right? I don't know why I got a flat. So the next thing I'm gonna do is check inside, and I'm gonna go very, very carefully and slowly all around the inside of the tire to make sure that there's not some sort of an imperfection that's gonna pierce my second tube, right? So when I said earlier, you're carrying 2 tubes, 2 CO2s, patch kit, right? If you go through your first tube and you're left with one more tube, then that's a little unnerving because now you don't have a backup. So when you do get another flat, you're screwed. And then you have to call the minivan of shame, right? So go through here and be careful. And the reason I'm saying be careful is because if a wire or a piece of glass is stuck in there and you go ripping through here, you just sliced your thumb open. Now, sidebar. When that happens to you, these little patch kits, the tiny little patch kit, most people will say, oh, it's just a temporary patch. I've never, ever, ever had to replace one of these patches. They work fantastic. And they stick really well over blood and water and everything else. So if you need a Band-Aid, these things are fantastic, right? So dual purpose. So one more little trick of the trade is the wheel is going to have a mark near, should have a mark near where the valve stem hole is. Another trick of the trade is to make sure that the letter on the tires is also on that same spot. It's really easy to locate that hole when you do that. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So then I'm going to take this, which was all nice and wrapped up really nicely tight inside of my saddlebag, and it looks like a ribbon. This one doesn't because I just pulled it out of his wheel, but it'll be nice and tight, right? What I'm going to do is make sure that this is open, right? I'm going to blow it up so now it's round. When it goes round, put it in the hole. And then, now that it's round, it's just going to sit nicely inside that tire.
Why do you blow air in it?
So I blow air in it because when it's sitting in, when it comes out of the tube, it's folded and looks like a ribbon. If I blow air in it, it blows it up a little bit and makes it nice and round, and now it's going to lay nicely inside of the tire. Does that make sense? Once it's laying nicely inside of the tire, I'm going to start from the valve stem side and just start gently popping it in. And then I'm going to take the palm of my hand and just flip it over. It was as simple as that. Now, Cassidy's bike was very, very nice to me because it's generally not that easy, right? So what I'm going to do after that is once this is full, I'm going to go ahead and take this little guy right here. So there's my adapter and there's the CO2. So as I take this and screw it into that, I'll just pretend when it's on there, I'm going to take this, there's a little bladder on there, I screw that into the adapter, and once the adapter's got a spring loaded on it, I'm going to grab it, hold it there, and pull my hand over the stem, so when I pull up on it, this thing is spring loaded, right? So when I push on that, the air comes out, right? This pierces that, and then it's spring loaded, and it lets all the air comes out. And it'll blow up your tire in like a second. I'm not exaggerating, like literally a second, and your tire will be full. There's a lot of pressure in here. So you hold it down, boom, your tire's full, right? Some people will say just hold it on there until the pressure equalizes. I've had some pop on me, so I wouldn't do that. So I just kind of hold it on there until it's really good and snug. And when you put some pressure on it, you can feel that that's enough pressure to get you home, right? You don't want it squishy, but you don't want it rock solid either, right? So good, you don't have a tire pressure gauge out there, so you don't know, right? So just real good and hard, and that'll get you home.
With one cartridge, how far will one cartridge go? 2 tires, 1 tire, 1 time?
So if you've got a 700 by 23 to 25, and you've got a 16 or a 12, the smaller one will generally get you like 1.5 tires, right? The bigger ones on the smaller tires will get you 2. For your bike, you're gonna have to go with the big one, and hopefully it fills it. right? You can get the bigger ones.
Yeah, that's what I use.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can get a lot bigger ones because you've got so much volume in your tire. But yeah, with the smaller, the tire pressures on a lot of the newer bikes is going lower and lower, right? Because the tires are getting so wide that even the brand new bikes, brand new road bikes, like Trevor's over there, I think he's got like 80 pounds of pressure in that thing. You know, when the older bikes with the narrower wheels, there was like 100 to 120 pounds of pressure. They're going lower and lower pressure because the tire pressure doesn't need to be that high. Dual purpose. One thing is when the pressure's not that high, you're not rattling your fillings out when you're riding. And then the other reason was they noticed that when the tire pressure was so high, they were saying the rolling resistance was lower. The problem was the lower rolling resistance wasn't that much lower, and the tire pressure was so high that anytime you hit sort of an imperfection, you're not touching the ground. You're in the air. And if you're not touching the ground, you're not propelling yourself forward. So you spent so much time in the air that you were getting less benefit than going with a lower pressure and then just rolling right over it. Does that make sense to everybody?
That was hard to change from.
Yeah, yeah.
It was tough.
It was very hard. But once you go to like, you know, if you bring it down if you're still riding a 23 and you bring it down to like 90 pounds, it's so much nicer to ride on, right? So, and then also with the tubeless, a lot of people are going tubeless, and one of the things that you want to have really high pressure for was so that you don't get a pitch flat, right? So if you're running tubeless tires, there's no tube in here at all, and you hit something really hard, it would pinch the tube and give you a flat. Well, there's no tube in there anymore because you have sealant inside that. So if you hit something really hard, it's not going to pinch a flat, right? If you get a pierce the sidewall or anything, the sealant's going to plug it, and you're good to go. Does that make sense? Does it really make sense, or are you guys just saying, yeah, sure? Okay. So feel free to chime in if you have any questions, because I'm going really fast. Okay. So once it's in there, pump it up, and then the easiest way to, because obviously you're not going to have a work stand.
That's my question. Is how do you do it without a rack when you're on the side of the bike trail?
Right?
Yeah.
So the bike is sitting like this. Remember, I have this in the smallest gear in the back, right? So what I'm going to do is grab it, set the chain on top of the smallest chain ring, right? So I just set that on there, and then I'm just going to pull this back a little bit. A lot of times you can just drop it on there, but I'm going to be nice to Cassidy's bike, and this will just fall right in, right? Now, once it's in, what I'll do is, once it's in there like that, then what I'll do is tighten it in the back a little bit and then pull it that direction. Now, the front, when you undo this, you have to unscrew it a little bit, right? Because you have those lower tabs in the front so your wheel doesn't fall off. You don't have those in the back. So when you take the rear wheel off, you just flick the lever and it falls out, right? So you don't have to really turn it that much once it's normally adjusted to go back in. But with this particular setup, since I did loosen it, what you want to do is tighten, it's the screw. The screw, all it is a screw and a nut, right? So I'm tightening the other side, and as you get to about 90 degrees, right? So it's all the way open, you get to about 90 degrees of resistance, and then just pull it tight, right? So that's about how much pressure you want on there. You don't want to tighten the bejesus out of it because you can't get it off, but you want to make sure that it's nice and tight. Now, two reasons. Number one, I've got the skewer going that way because it's really easy for me to get it off. Oftentimes, it's faced the other way, and you can't get your fingers in there to pull it off, right? And it's also an old mountain biking trick. If you're going that direction and something grabs your skewer, now it's undone, right? If it's going that way, nothing's going to grab it. Does that make sense to everybody? Cool. So who wants to try and change your own tires? So we'll start with you.